Working on the school bus today. Wanted to install a mechanical oil pressure gauge so that I make sure that I got oil, because the factory gauges, they're a little wonky. So what I did was took one of the plugs out of the H-pop in the top and tied in the pressure gauge tubing to that, and I'm using copper tubing. A lot of the stuff I seen online said use a T and put it in line with the OEM pressure sensor that's right there, but since there's already two plugs available as well as the OEM sensor, I figured I'd go ahead and just take one of those out and put the secondary gauge there. So here's how I ran it. I ran it from the sensor spot underneath that hole down there across here, it's not touching that tube, and up and into that hole in the firewall that was already there. On the inside of the bus, I ran it through the firewall there and up and over the pedals. And then on this side and up over the pedals where it's touching on stuff, I put the split loom over the copper tubing to keep it from chafing. And I ran the wires for the light to the instrument fuse on the fuse panel, which is right here on the dash. And then there's a ground already provided right there from something before. And then for the gauge pod, I just used some self-tapping screws, drilled them into the vent piece right here for the defroster, and hooked the gauge up. And just to make sure, we'll go ahead and start it, and I'll show you the wonky factory gauges. So the gauge doesn't ever really get to zero whenever you start the bus. But as you can see, we have 40 pounds of pressure on the mechanical gauge. So I know I have good oil pressure. And when you rev it, it'll sometimes come up, but not always. It's a little bit delayed. So that's my aftermarket oil pressure gauge install on a T444e on a 1998 International 3800 bus frame. As always, this is not a recommended thing nowadays, because if you get a leak on the tubing, it will leak inside your cab here, and if you get a leak on the tubing outside, you might not notice it. So always keep an eye on that. Thank you.